For me, my parents weren't that religious. My dad was born here. He came here when he was, I think, 7 years old. So he came from Pakistan, pretty much born and brought up here, speaks perfect English. My father has an MBE, and he wasn't overly religious. I think that was due to his father, who kind of came here, I think, in the early 60s, or no, late 50s, I don't know, something around that time. He worked in a factory like a lot of Asian men. So he never really educated my father on religion, and my father therefore couldn't really educate us on religion. And I think there's lots of people like throughout the country that have had very similar sort of experiences. My mum was brought up in Pakistan. She came here when she was 18. And she grew up more culturally. So Islam was some part of it, but no one prayed 5 times a day. We did observe Ramadan, but we believed we were Muslim. That was part of our identity. But yeah, it was never. We were growing up quite liberal, to integrate with society, get on with everyone.
Were you quite close to your family?
Yes, I think I was. My mum's always been very gentle with me, and I think with a lot of like young Pakistani or Asian even boys, they're quite spoiled by their mothers. Being the eldest of 5 children, I think certainly I was. I was quite mollycoddled, which didn't really prepare me greatly for life. You know, I never moved out for university or anything. Well, my siblings did. Well, I never. I used to have pretty much quite a lot of everything on a plate. I wasn't really told off that much. So
were you the only boy?
No, there was 4 boys, 1 sister. My mum came from a quite affluent background. So my mum always saw her father living a very lavish sort of lifestyle, and the boys were treated like kings in our family. So I definitely had that sense of entitlement. So yeah, that's how I kind of grew up.
And let's say within your community, was it a very multicultural area?
Very much so, yeah. I grew up in Haringey. Initially when I grew up in an extended family, so until I was maybe about 4 or 5. So it was my grandparents, my uncles, my aunties, all my cousins. It was a reasonably big house. It wasn't huge. My parents and me, and then when my sister was born, we all stayed in one room, but then it kind of got a bit crowded. And I think my mum being from the outside of the family, it was difficult for her to integrate herself. So she asked my dad to leave that house, which caused a lot of problems. But yeah, eventually they did. They bought a flat in a house, so we moved out. It was at that time there was a lot of Greek people there, black people, Jamaican, West Indian people, a few Turkish people, but the community changed in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. By the time I got to about 10, 11, my primary school had one of the most multicultural schools in the world, and I'd go as far as that. Nationalities from everywhere. Haringey was a place where immigrants just seemed to like, and their children all went to school, which was really nice because you kind of get to learn about different cultures, you mix people, and I thought that was really, really positive.
And was your peer group quite mixed then?
Yeah, I think once I had a best friend that was Greek. Next time, my best friend was from Jamaica. What was nice was we got to try lots of different foods from different places. But yeah, you learn as well. So you go to their houses, their parents, you speak to their parents. And I think that's, for me that was important because I know some of my friends, or some of the extremists, even people that I came across later on in life, they never had that. They just grew up in single communities where everyone was Pakistani or everyone was Asian. It's very hard to hate a community or hate people once you've mixed with them and you've seen them and they've been good to you. So, when some people would say something about a certain sort of racial group, I'd say, no, they're not all like that, because I've had that experience.
Was there much discrimination towards yourself?
I think when we first moved in, I'm not sure if it was racial. I think this was a time in the early 80s where there was racism was out. It was a time of community change. Yeah, there was we definitely been called Paki a few times initially. I had when I was very young, I had rock stone. I mean, my mum was called Bud Bud Ding Ding. The difference between Pakistani and Indian. That's how ignorant we were. I think there was some community members that felt threatened with, someone different. I think we were like the only Asians on the street, coming into the street. And eventually those same people became my mum and dad's friends. So it's amazing how society, and I literally saw them change, and their parents who were once hostile, as we kind of integrated. My mum learned English. We learned English. Our dress sense kind of changed. We became a little bit more affluent. I think that kind of increased people's respect. I don't know, maybe society had changed. But yeah, racism definitely got less as I got older. When I went to college, I think we grew up quite working class, and then by college my parents had been able to do quite well. My father had worked very hard, bought properties. We become much more middle class. Education was always emphasised to us. My father was quite keen on education, and I got into a really good college. It was a big culture shock for me, because I came from a place called Haringey where there was a certain sort of culture. Like there's subcultures within every culture, and as a youth you learn kind of street culture, how you speak slang. You can almost call it ghetto language, and I knew quite a lot of words. In Woodhouse College they didn't speak like that, so I ended up being the class clown. I thought the things I was saying, which we used to say in our school, which was quite funny, and everyone just kind of laughed when I said it. Like, shh, quiet. Everyone, people wanted to study. People didn't find my sense of humour. For me, it was I really didn't like college too much. But here was a time where, for me, what was quite interesting, and one of the things I remember about Woodhouse College was I got to mix with a lot of Jewish people. And, there's always this thing about Muslims and Jews don't get on. I got on really well with them. I just saw people for people. I didn't really care if they were Hindu, Sikh, Muslim, Christian, whatever. You're a person. But what they did do was, there was a time where I watched something on the news. So there was in Bangladesh there were some floods. I remember there was a Muslim guy crying, saying, "Ya Allah, Ya God, oh God, please help us, And I felt something in my heart, even though I wasn't religious or practicing at the time, I felt quite bad. And I think maybe the fact that he was Muslim, he was wearing a hat, had a big beard, I felt a sense of I have to do something. So I started raising money, and the people who gave the most were actually the Jewish people. So for me, it's, there was all this, Jewish people are stingy. They gave loads, but it was all about humanity. So for me, I think not a lot of Muslims kind of integrate with Jewish people. And I think it works both ways. There's a lot of stereotypes, people don't kind of mix. But I had a fantastic experience with them. Some of my good friends became Jewish. I went to their houses, and there was so much in common between Muslims and Jews. And so later on, when I kind of became a bit more radical and people always blame Jews for something, conspiracy theory, etc., I found it really hard to accept, because it goes back to my experience. I've mixed with them, but they're normal people. Like, you get on with them, you go, alright, they support Tottenham, I support Arsenal. There's a bit of banter we have generally. When politics kind of got involved, I suppose people then become separated, and then there be divisions come along. But I think you can certainly have an intellectual conversation, and you can have your views without getting heated. I'm not sure if all Muslims could do that nowadays. So, like, for example, the Israel-Palestine issue is so heated. I think we need to think more dialogue needs to be had around that. And I think one of the things I learned as well was to kind of, appreciate Jewish history, because they have their own experience in life. They've been through world wars. They've been persecuted throughout history. So I actually took an interest to learn about the Jewish experience. from the ancient kingdom to the Babylonian times to how Jews and Muslims used to get on in Spain and the Khazars and the Himyarite kingdom. So much I've learned. The persecution that they faced, the pogroms. And it's when you kind of see it from there, you kind of understand the experience and why people feel sensitive in a certain way. And I think often Muslims are quite self-centered and they look at their own history. They don't look at the Jewish history. I think equally Jewish, sometimes they see their own history. They don't look at the Muslim history or what's happened in recent times. But people just broad brush. It's the beautiful thing about Britain, especially in London. It's lovely. You meet so many wonderful people. I know about so many different cultures, and it's quite unique.
And if we were just to talk about your radicalisation, let's say, and how you first became involved in extremist activities, what do you think was the spark for you?
Young, there's always this thing about a rebel without a cause. Young people kind of want to rebel. They know politics. They know a little bit about politics, or in their dress sense. There's this kind of joke that a lot of white people become gothic and become Marilyn Manson-like, whereas Muslims become terrorists. But it's that whole kind of notion. Your hormones are changing. For me, I grew up in Haringey, then we moved towards Tottenham, and in Tottenham there was a time where there was a lot of young black youth, and there was a lot of muggings going on, and for me, I found that I was pretty much a good boy. I suppose that kind of made me an easy target. Constantly got mugged. I'd walk down, I wanted to be fashionable, so I wanted to wear my Chicago Bulls hat, or at that time, that's what was in. I wanted to look hip, but every time I'd wear it, it kind of just got taken off my head. And I think there was one time at school, I had a knife put to my throat, literally, and the guy was huge, and I think that even the teacher was kind of scared of him. Was
it like done in open,
yeah. He was leaving after his GCSEs, but literally I was put up against the wall and I was mugged for £5. It happened so much, and I didn't really have much protection. There wasn't many Asians in my area. I was like one of the only Pakistanis.
And you were the eldest in your family.
I was the eldest in my family, yeah. My brother's also got mugged a few times. My brother's quite gentle, it was just like, Mum was always like, if someone asks you for money, just give it to them.
And can you describe how that made you feel?
And you feel so debased, you feel so helpless. And it was very, very sensitive for me, and I felt like, as a man, my manhood was actually challenged. To get mugged by yourself is one thing, but in front of all your friends, you kind of got an image in front of, and that's the whole thing about street creed. And in street creed, if you're getting mugged, for lack of a better word, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but you're called a pussy. You can fight back, but was it actually wise? And I never knew how to fight, and I was very aware of that. I never grew up fighting or anything like that. Even though sometimes I did have to hype myself up to pretend. That whole Fresh Prince, come on, don't hold me back. So, but I knew I couldn't really. But just in front of your friends, you kind of had to have that image.
Were your parents aware of what was going on at this time?
I didn't really want to tell my parents too much, because for them, you kind of also got that pride in front of your brothers as well as the eldest. So I kind of, I wouldn't say I accepted it, but I just used to just walk away or go around the back, and there was that sort of time, and I did feel like really alone and I'd go into other areas in London where there was a strong Pakistani community, and there was people my age, and they'd hang around in gangs. And to some degree, I kind of understand why people hang around, because, protection. For me, I really, the sort of people that I could have hung around with, I actually made a choice not to, because I had certain aspirations educationally, and I knew had I gone to hang around with them, I would have to be part of the gang. I didn't want to really go down that route. But then it got to a stage where, teachers weren't doing anything, and I came across some Muslims as well, just when I was finishing my GCSEs, and as I started college, and there were just hang around. They're giving me leaflets out. And they all used to hang around, and suddenly, you know, birds of a feather flocked together. They looked like me, you know, some of them were younger. There was also gangs that would go and mug Asian boys in particular, because they were easy pickings. Like there was a group, it was in Southgate College, and I remember one of the boys got so fed up, he called like a group called Al-Muhajiround, who was Omar Bakri's group. They were a mixture. They were black, white, Asian, whatever. But they didn't see themselves as a colour or creed. They just saw themselves as a religion. So some of these guys had come out of prison. They were former thugs who now had big beards, and you know, and they would stand outside the college and said, anyone touches a Muslim, we'll knock you out. And they would go around, and anywhere that there would be problems, anywhere in London. And for me, I grew up on the A team. You know, one of them actually looked like B.A. Baraka, so it was wow. And then I watched a documentary called The Tottenham Ayatollah. It was on, I think, BBC Two. And I found it, I shouldn't have, but I found it quite cool. I was actually, you know, I thought Omar Bakri was funny. You know, I liked the way that they would all hang around together and they protect each other. So, and I found out that the mosque that they used to attend was a mosque right next to my house. So I started going to it. It was like maybe 10 minutes to Whiteman Road Mosque every Thursday without fail. Every Thursday that mosque would be packed full of young people like me. Packed. We had a speaker in Omar Bakri who was former Hizb ut-Tahrir spiritual leader. He had now rebelled and started up his own group. He was charismatic. He was funny. At that age, maybe 17, 18, you don't know any better. He had a big beard, you believe everything he says. He would talk about topics about the Day of Judgment, he would talk about heaven and hell, and then he would talk about marriage. And for a young guy, these were really interesting things. I'd get you married, I've got some beautiful sisters, that's what they call them. Say, you know, there's lots of girls, and to a degree he had a point. He wouldn't emphasize on education. He just felt education wasn't important. And he would constantly tell young women, some very smart women, that were going to go into medicine, dentistry, etc., law, or you're not allowed to go to university. So then some of these women, they just left after GCSEs or after A-levels, or even during, I know some that left in medical school, and they just wanted to become stay-at-home wives because they actually should do it, and therefore they convinced themselves that they wanted to. And I think, you know, like it goes back to, you know, when you don't have another narrative and you believe that's the only way, even though the Prophet, peace be upon him, is reported to have said that seeking knowledge from cradle to grave is incumbent on every male, Muslim and Muslimah, and he emphasized the woman. And this is one of the few, you know, a time where he really emphasized on women getting knowledge, and they used to be the bedrock of the Muslim community. But no, not in the group that I was in. It was very much, you know, woman's place was stay at home, make babies. You know, they could come to demonstrations, stand at the back and maybe shout a couple of things, slogans. But yeah, it seemed to attract people. There was a lot of people who were quite street, if I can call them that, that, you know, Omar Bakri made sense to. And then when you saw the people around him, like, you know, big kind of cool looking thugs that would come out of prison, you know, it was, in terms of street cred, he had street cred, you know, and I think that's where a lot of, you know, government policies, they don't understand that. You've got to have street cred to get through to young people. If you don't, you know, I can sit here in a suit, or I can sit here dress and speak, and it's not going to get through unless you have the sort of language that they can relate to. It's not going to work. He had it. His right hand man was Anjem Chowdhury.
What was your take on Anjem?
Anjem I found very clever. I still find him clever. I completely disagree with what he says, and I pray that God one day changes him. But the Anjem Chowdhury that you see on TV is not the Anjem Chowdhury behind closed doors. He's actually a really funny guy. He'll crack jokes with you. He'll sit down with you. He'll talk to you on the level. Whether that's indoctrinating you, I don't know. You know, he was very approachable, as are a lot of the people that you see, they're like monsters on TV, but behind closed doors, they'll sit down with you, talk to you about absolutely anything. And for me, it was a place I could confide in as well. I mean, you can talk about girls, you can talk about problems. If you have a problem with anyone harassing you, they'll come down, 6, 7 boys, sort your problems out. Because they didn't believe in man-made law. The police aren't going to help you. You know, and in one way you don't really want to go to the police, because again it's that whole street thing, you know, no one wants to be a rat, and they'll come, and they, in some sense, in that time they squashed a lot of problems, but then they would also kind of bring you to their way. So you, after attending circles, they'll say to you, come, you know what, we'll pick you up from your house. My parents weren't like really aware of, you know, my dad didn't like Omar Bakri, he kept on telling me Omar Bakri's bad, Anjem Chowdhury's bad, these guys. But then it comes to, I'm starting to learn Islamic knowledge now. Dad, it says this, you know. Why is this wrong? My dad didn't have Islamic knowledge. His dad worked in a factory for predominantly. He never gave him the knowledge. My dad worked very hard to put food on the table, make a better life for us. He didn't have the knowledge. Couldn't count on my views. It's just, no, he's just bad. No, you got to give me more than that. No, he's just bad. No, I don't believe you, Dad. You know what, I love you as my dad, but you know what, I'm not going to listen to you on this. And it's that I was rebelling. And I actually felt... And then my dad took me to Pakistan, and it was just like a trip. And the views that I had, Dad said, here, speak to the local, what we call the Bir, the local kind of village imam for 6 or 7 villages. He was very well known. And I completely floored him. He had never been challenged before.
Okay.
For, you know, because every village that, you know, would just agree and listen to it. So when I asked him, oh, it says this in the Quran, it says in the, why do you believe this? This is grave worship, this is that, this is Sufism. He didn't know what to say. He was like, oh, it's very good that you're learning about Islam. And he gave me a pat on the back, and he was just, you know. And for me then, it kind of even ennobled me. So many ignorant Pakistanis and Muslims out there, they follow people like this. I have a duty to teach them the right way.
And how old were you at this stage, roughly?
How old was I? Maybe 21, maybe less than that, I don't know, 20. And I just felt that, you know, it was my duty to change the world at that time.
Did you feel very empowered?
Very. After, you know, when I was doing my A-levels, I did decently in my A-levels. I got into law school. But this was a field that, you know, because so many Muslims didn't know anything about religion, here you have people like Omar Bakri teaching you every week different things, hadiths, Quran, you start learning the recitation, you start quoting things. And, you know, so many people are drawn to you, even girls. You know, you can go and just almost flaunt your knowledge. And this is the thing, you don't realise you're doing it. Because in Islam, you're supposed to go things with a pure heart, with pure intentions. I started flaunting knowledge in front of, like, Muslim girls. And, oh, you're so knowledgeable. You know, you start the conversation and, like, you know, suddenly you're so popular amongst the girls as well. Because you're pious and you're cool. And, you know, then all these girls want to marry you. They would say to you, like, you know, through their friends, you know, we're really interested in marriage with you and stuff. And, you know, I always said I wanted a really pretty girl. So, you know, at that time, and I said that to some of the leaders of Al-Muhajiround. I said I want someone buff. And that was hey, listen to what this brother wants. Listen, he wants someone buff. And they used to find that really, really funny.
How was your treatment of women then?
To be honest with you, it was difficult because I was trying to get into my religion, but because I hadn't grown up, I didn't know how to pray until I was 18. You know, for me, Islam was kind of forced to go to Quran school when I was 6. And by the time I was 11, I'd learned the Quran. By the time I was 12, I'd forgot the Quran because I didn't really want to learn it. No one actually told me what it was about. And the lady used to hit me with a stick when I was young, and, you know, I had a really bad experience with that. No one taught me how to pray. And it's only to university, and through Al-Muhajiround I started learning about, you know, praying and stuff like that. I wasn't really interested, so I grew up quite secularized, you know. At school, you know, when I was, I don't know, 9, 10, I used to have girlfriends, you know. People would openly do stuff, like some of my 10, 11-year-old friends would have sex When we were on, we'd go on school trips, the teachers would go to sleep and the guys would go. I knew as a Muslim I couldn't do that, but I used to find it quite interesting. And young guys, they watch pornography, etc., etc. Then you feel debased. As you're not allowed sex until you're married. So that's why marriage was pushed at a young age for young people, which can make sense. But then my parents would say, no, you're not financially secure, you're not mature enough. So it was difficult because then you kind of you're learning about religion, but then you're also attracted to girls. And your friends are attracted to girls, even the religious ones. You can see them looking at girls. It's natural. The boys and the girls are checking. And then when I got to university, I was trying to be religious, but then there was Freshers Week, and
Freshers Week.
You don't want to miss that out. So I'd go to you kind of go to the prayer room. All right, and then kind of almost leading a double life. I hate being this bar place, but it's kind of fun.
Did you feel guilty though?
I felt so guilty. I used to go clubbing quite a lot. I used to feel so bad, and I remember because I was part of Al-Muhajiround, I felt the need to even preach. So if I'd see a Muslim girl dancing with a non-Muslim, I'd go and preach to her. Why are you with him for? And then one girl said to me, you know what, I listened to you, but you actually treat me worse than the guy I was with, and he was non-Muslim. And then the penny dropped to go, I actually felt like a hypocrite. I thought, I'm messing around with doing certain things, and it's just so wrong. And I really felt bad and doing stuff like that. But every time I do something wrong, I'd go back to religion to rectify myself. Every time I go back to religion, I'd end up going back to Al-Muhajiround because they were the people that I could learn from. And sometimes they would use this justification. We're going to do dawah, which is preaching outside the mosque. And it's funny because some of them they'd go and preach to the prettiest girls. This dawah is quite fun, I'll come and join you next week. But it was that. When I got to university, then I went to University of Westminster. Came across Wahhabi Salafi Islam, which was quite close to what Al-Muhajiround were like. But then there was another group called Hizb ut-Tahrir. Now Hizb ut-Tahrir were a lot more. They were very well dressed. Seemed to be a lot more educationally aspirant. They believed in the Islamic worldview of having a khilafah around the world, but they were smart. It suddenly wasn't the street cred. These were so-called intellectuals, and some of the talks that you went. I remember, I went to a few and I was quite impressed because they would say you have to dress a certain way, you have to be a certain manner, and they wouldn't let anyone in to become a member of Hizb ut-Tahrir. You had to first be a supporter of Hizb ut-Tahrir, show your credentials, show that you are able to speak well, and then you'd get personal kind of thing. Now I already believed in the Khilafah at this point, Al-Muhajiround, I said in a sense, indoctrinated by them. I started attending Abu Hamza's mosque in Finsbury Park, which Omar Bakri endorsed, because Omar Bakri said, I'd go there, we'd be doing training, all sorts of things.
What was he like? What was your take on him?
Abu Hamza, I didn't like him. Just felt he was very cold. If you weren't someone important, he didn't really want to know. I'd actually go up to him, and Omar Bakri would come and shake your hand, give you a bit of acknowledgement. Anjem Chowdhury, certainly. Abu Hamza wasn't like that. He was very, very cold. It's almost like you're insignificant. But then he was very passionate on the thing. He would encourage people to go to Afghanistan. When I went in there, I used to see people from all over the world, jihadis, literally all over the world. They would, again, it goes back to street cred. They would have so much street respect. Oh, you actually fought the Russians, and they would go and they'd talk about, I killed this many people, and they'd make up stories about how the angels used to fight with them. And when you're young, you're like, wow, these guys were super built, and they're like He-Men, there were people from Chechnya, Bosnia, there were people from Afghanistan, Somalia, and then you used to get people, because Abu Hamza was quite popular, you'd get people up and down the country coming from Scotland, Birmingham, Leeds, everywhere, and they used to do lectures like that, and it was packed, and you know, I felt, wow, I'm really part of something here, you know. This is my belonging, you know. But I wasn't that religious. That was my problem, you know. I wanted to. I didn't have a big beard, you know. I was really confused on where I wanted to go. I wanted to become more religious, but then I found it really hard. My family wasn't that religious.
And throughout this time, how was your relationship with your family?
It was alright. I mean, I've always loved my mum. They didn't really pray or anything like that. But then I think they came to a point where they had started praying. They started praying. I always had a decent relationship. My dad always used to say, don't go to these things, they're extreme. He'd sometimes get elders who knew a bit more than him to try to tell me. I'd floor them too. Even though now looking back on it, I didn't know that much to what the others knew more than them. Even though a lot of the stuff that I knew in the Hadiths, I knew in the Quran were completely out of context. They didn't have the counter-narrative to combat what I was saying. If you don't have a counter-narrative, I'm only going to be more bold. You know, we didn't have to follow the UK law, we didn't follow man-made law, we didn't need insurance, mortgages were wrong, you know, we don't believe in the police, we can just put posters up anywhere, we don't need any permission from anyone, we don't stand up for the judge. These sort of things, very data things that will make your life very, very difficult. And Islam isn't about making your life difficult. I've learned that it's about making your life, you know, you have rules and you have parameters, but Islam is about facilitating ease for yourself as well.
And if you could kind of give us an understanding of what it was that really drew you to the organisation.
And, you know, and for me, so I came to say I was still looking for my identity when I got to Westminster. You know, I had like the jihadi kind of Wahhabis coming in behind closed doors, Salafis, that's what they call themselves, the Hizb ut-Tahrir society, and you know, it's just I liked Hizb ut-Tahrir. They were smarter than I hated looking scruffy. I've always been, I think, somewhat obsessed with my looks, looking smart. My mum and dad always told me to look smart. And then when I used to hang around with the Wahhabis and Al-Muhajiround, you know, I used to have like the kind of thobe, wear the kind of that red kind of tablecloth thing, have a beard, and I remember there was one girl that came up to me on the street. She goes, "Are you a dentist?" And she was absolutely taking the mick, and go, "No, I'm a Muslim." And I was thinking, why the hell am I wearing this? So I kind of spoke to a HD person, Hizb ut-Tahrir person, who was quite senior. He goes, "Look, you don't have to wear that. That was just a tradition at the time." You know, and he gave me hadiths to combat it, and I was thinking, in my heart, thank God. And I took it off, and I was kind of back to normal. But then, you know, because suddenly Hizb ut-Tahrir started to be more like me and how I wanted to be, I started going down the Hizb ut-Tahrir way. It was a little bit less extreme. You know, they didn't advocate violence or anything like that, but they wanted revolution and they wanted the Islamic State, and they convinced me that it was fired on me, meaning it was obligatory as a collective duty that we have to establish this, and then we have to educate more Muslims that don't know about this. I was trying to keep up on religion, so for me it was good. You know, I had the religion kind of aspect I was learning. The people were quite cool. We would go out, eat out, really nice restaurants. Then I was assigned someone who was quite senior within the kind of rank and file of like Hizb ut-Tahrir and of it. There's the top people, then there's sub-leaders who then, I suppose, do indoctrinate you. They're called private halakas, similar to what Omar Bakri Al-Muhajiround had experienced. But this is even more intense. They will actually teach you how to debate. So if an atheist says this is what you say, you know, and it's literally, you have to learn this. And they give you little books to read, and you have to learn, then they'll test you on it. And this is all preparation to join the group. I probably, at that time, I wasn't smart enough. I admit that, you know, they were quite smart brothers. I grew up in North London, where we spoke in a certain way. Our manners were in a certain way. It was what they would possibly call a bit jahil, a bit backward. But then I started questioning them as well. I was coming out with stuff they couldn't answer. Again, I felt so empowered. I felt so good. And no, I like this Sufism stuff. I don't really understand it at the time. And I think that was the point I can actually say I moved away from radicalisation, because there was a time not so long when the Iraq War started, I actually felt it was my duty to go and fight the Americans and the British. I was absolutely convinced I had to go.
And did you want to go, or did you think it was your duty?
I felt it was my duty. It was hard because I've always felt British. I've always kind of, I would say like the extremist narrative is, we're Muslim, we're not British. We don't have any identity. The only identity you have is the Muslim identity. We don't believe in nationalism. But then it's really hard to reconcile. You know, I love football. I love Arsenal. I love my fish and chips. You know, I grew up on British TV. You know, and I've come across such nice British people. I mean, how can I hate them? That was the thing I really used to find hard. You know, how can I hate people that I've mixed with? I know they're not like that. I don't care if they're not Muslim in my heart, but no, it was, you're Muslim, we're supreme. It was fascism. It was fascism, and I think that's what Islamists do. They indoctrinate you. So you're not really allowed to have non-Muslim friends. You're not allowed to hang around with them. We're going to take over. I remember Al-Muhajiround, we're going to take over Downing Street and put the black flags on. In my head, I actually believed it. Oh, that's going to be a glorious day. People in the groups are literally like that. They don't really think. You'll see a lot of extremist groups, they're full of vulnerable people who are even being bullied or feel like outcasts, or they feel like they want a position of power. You know, they're not getting that in the student union or whatever, you know, or they've been excluded, they've had a relationship breakdown, they might have been abused, or their parents are having problems, mental health. And then these groups, they just take you in, exploit it to a different level, and they actually encourage you, and you actually believe it's your duty. And I think there's, you know, I was lucky I stopped at a certain time, because I studied law, and because people questioned me, I used to question things, and I'm the sort of person I research a topic to the max just to prove I'm right. Times I couldn't justify what I was saying. So okay, but I think that's always been a good. And there's people who don't, because they don't actually challenge anything. Ut-Tahrir, for example, some of the top leaders, really smart doctors, dentists, but clueless when it comes to critical thinking. You know, it was just all logical, but they didn't know how to critically think. I'd suddenly worked out my path in life that, you know, I'm not going to go down that way. I remember he did a couple of one of the HT people came, and I was there, and they were asking about the Khilafah, and he floored him. It was the first time I remember, and then I saw it again with someone even more extreme, who I thought was so clever as a HT member. He didn't know what to say. Then the HT's credibility in my eyes just went down the pan. You know, this whole Khilafah stuff is, you know, it's not, you know, there's so much more that needs to be done. The world isn't black and white. We don't have a lot of scholars like that, of that sort of you know, that notion that could do that and speak English as well. I was much more open to people who would even criticize Islam, and I learned, you know, so much about so many controversial issues. And I just realized that Islam was about mercy. In Islam is mercy and love and compassion. 100%. I know that for a fact now. I didn't at the time. You know, we do have something about justice, and we're not pacifists. But some of the greatest values that I found in Islam are completely in line with Anglican Christianity. Love, tolerance. Those principles are in Islam, and they're some of the highest principles. So then I kind of thought, you know, British values, where do they come from? Again, what I just quoted before. A lot of it comes from Christianity. Suddenly Britain's not so bad. You know, it's in a way, and I think they're universal principles. In fact, you don't even have to be religious. You can be a humanist, whatever. As humans, you know, we believe we're one family. That's what Islam said.
And let's say with regards to Quilliam.
Initially, when I came across Quilliam, I had started working with the Islam channel. They were quite Wahhabi, Salafi. In fact, they were very Wahhabi and Salafi. I remember I'd created a program for them, and I pitched the idea to the CEO, who was a nice guy, and he said, yeah, run with it. My idea was to make it about different events throughout the country and to make it in a fun, engaging way to get young Muslims engaged. At the same time, do some Sufi events as well. They weren't happy with that. The producers and the ones under him, they wanted all Wahhabi, boring events, and they wanted me to act in a certain way. I couldn't do it. And I realised suddenly most of the programship about that was Salafi, Wahhabi, which just really, really bugged me. You know, I think if you're going to talk about unity, you have to get all Muslim groups involved, not just your sort of worldview. The people who ran that station wasn't like that. And Quilliam actually did a really, really excellent piece on how Islam Channel promotes extremism, especially Saudi sort of extremism. So I thought, hey, Quilliam's quite really, really good. And then there was all this scandal, oh, it takes government money, this and all this other slander against him. But then I like I said, by this time I didn't accept what people said, so I told so much other stuff about Quilliam and how it's spying on Muslims and stuff. I read The Islamist by Ed Hussein. I thought it was a fantastic book. I could really relate to it because I think he had a very similar sort of experience to what I did. But Quilliam was just one of those ones, you know, because it challenges the narrative that you're always taught. It's almost challenging your identity, and that's quite harsh, and that's quite difficult to listen to, you know. Majid was someone that challenged that, and, you know, they openly challenged it. I just couldn't understand how could you be a secularist. Oh my God, I've just been taught secularism was wrong, but then I started, you know, looking into it, and I suppose the Islamist mindset, and I think it always sticks with you to some degree. It's very, very difficult to break those shackles. You know, every time you think of Islam, your Islam, because you've been indoctrinated, you don't even know you've been indoctrinated to a certain level. You know, so I couldn't understand how can we believe in secularism, how can we believe in modern values, blah, blah, blah. Some of it is completely against Islam. Then you read history. And you look at history, and I remember, I think I heard Majid say something that a lot of it was borrowed from the Persians and the Byzantine civil democracy. Yeah, the Khilafah that I'd so loved, that is the God state, is filtered through human beings, and human beings have learnt stuff from other cultures, and that's not God's law, you know. And then I started learning about liberal values and democracy, and I learned about Spain, Islamic Spain and Islamic Italy. And you see a lot of these values in the Renaissance period actually came from Islam. Yeah, with Majid, you know, he actually said certain things, and I kind of researched them. I liked the way he spoke. I thought he was very dignified the way he spoke. And then I came across Horace, and I'd watched Horace a couple of times on TV, and I really liked what Horace said. You know, I used to watch Horace on YouTube quite a lot. Very engaging. And very articulate. And I had a few questions, and it's very difficult as a young Muslim to find someone that can answer these questions. And there were certain things that bothered me about Quilliam, and I'm one of the people that always gives someone the benefit of the doubt. You know, in Islam you're supposed to make excuse for your brothers and sisters 70 times, and that means God knows how many in the Arab sort of tradition. And so I say, before I judge anyone, let me ask them the question. I met Harris, we sat down, I had lots of questions about Majid, I had questions about Quilliam, I had questions about government funding. I had so many questions, and he completely answered all of them. And more so, he gave me new perspective on things. I said, no, that can't be right. I went and researched, and it was absolutely true. Yeah. You know, you might not have the big beard, you know. I've learned, you know, looking at people, you never judge a book by its cover. Yeah. You know, sometimes the most sincere people are the ones that are, you know, that do wear suits. Or what is a Muslim? You know, a Muslim is someone that is supposed to be very educated and articulate. The Prophet, peace be upon him, had the most refined. He was one of the most refined individuals. Yeah. And he talks about the refinement of the heart, refinement of the tongue. you know, the eloquence and to respect. Islam, I've learned, is all about respect, which we call adab. And respect for yourself, respect for your neighbours, respect for other people, non-Muslims, respect for the world, respect for animals. That's not the Islam that people preach nowadays.
What do you think would have been your biggest challenge to overcome?
Yeah, I think number one is finding your identity. I think only recently I found out who I was. Literally for so many years I didn't know where I was going, who I was. I felt so bad being a hypocrite. I had this kind of dual identity. I was Pakistani, I was Asian, I was Muslim, I was British. What was I? You know, and you know, at certain times I'd go to Bhangra gigs and I'd hang around with the, you know, Sikhs and the Hindus and the Muslims, and other times I'd, you know, oh, suddenly we don't like India. Oh, I'm Pakistani now. Oh no, I'm not Pakistani, I'm Muslim. It's almost, you become schizophrenic. Then you have to keep up appearances, and then one day you're like this. I think it was just working out. That's what the hardest bit was, working out who I was. Literally, I think so many young Muslims have that problem. They literally don't know who they are, and it's really, really, really difficult. And there isn't a lot of leadership out there in the Muslim community, and that's just a fact. And the ones that are, they're often the ones that shout the loudest and look like the part. But they're often the ones that can sometimes, you know, lead you astray.
And even talking about that now, with regards to Islamic State, because obviously they're quite prevalent in the media at the moment.
Yes.
How has that kind of impacted on your relationship with Islam?
I feel a sense of guilt in the sense that I know my brothers and sisters in Islam. Even though I believe everyone's brothers and sisters in humanity, in Islam they're going astray and they're young. And I look at them with mercy as opposed to with contempt, because I could have been one of those. I can see how they've gone down that road, and I feel like not enough is being done. I do agree with David Cameron that Muslim community, not enough is being done. And I think the people that can do it are people who can communicate to these young people on that level, and there's very few. And I don't think it's a lack of wanting to do things. I don't, from the Muslim community. I think there is people who generally want to do it, and there's people, but they just don't know how to get through to them. Because you've got to know Islam, and you've got to then know the culture of the people as well. And often if you grow up in that culture, you're not very religious. And it's very difficult to argue with someone or even explain to someone if you haven't got the religious knowledge. And there's certain people that grew up in religious institutions who are now preaching to these sort of people. That's not going to work, because like I was going back to, there's this whole thing about street cred. You know, I ain't going to listen to you, blah blah, Maulana or Imam Saab. It's not their reality. The language they use, the way they talk, you know, what they relate to. And sometimes when you grow up in a harsh sort of environment, there's places in the UK that are harsh areas, no doubt about it. Someone who's been through that kind of experience is going to be able to relate to you. The problem is the people who can relate to extremism still can't sometimes harbour the same sort of views. There's very few people who actually can come out of that. There's a few, and work.
Would you have any advice for them? I mean, people who may be facing similar challenges.
I would say they need to engage with more people. I think we need to organise trips for people. One of the things I've learned about the Prophet, peace be upon him, was he used to travel a lot, especially when he was younger, and he would mix with different cultures. And I think even if people mixed with cultures and learnt British history, meet different people, I think that will really help them. I think Muslims also have to understand that the majority of people in this country have been against the Iraq War. You know, we've condemned the Iraq War, and I remember one of the most humbling things when the Iraq War did happen, there was over 1 million people in the cold weather that came out. Most of them were non-Muslims. How could I ever hate people like that? And I actually felt on that day that these people, whatever religion or if they're not religion, they're sticking up for justice. And I think we have to kind of remember that. We have to kind of engage with people in a more productive way when there's harsh conditions, or just kind of bring their own reality in it, and again quote Quran and Hadith and the sort of scholars that they like to fit their worldview. But the vast majority of Muslims don't believe that. And I think it is a testimony that most Muslims are peaceful. Equally, Muslims have to understand there is sort of correct interpretation. Listen to it. You know, if you're not, go and see your local imam and let him explain to you why it's wrong.